It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
$7:00 in the PM on a Thursday means one thing. Well, it means two things, actually. Number one, Fantasy Football Night in America, as we are your official kickoff for Week 11 in your fantasy football leagues. And number two, it is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show brought to you by the FFPC exclusively on the Better Sports Network. Welcome in, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. We're going to have a nice 2 hours here. Going to be a lot of fun, and we're so glad you're spending it with us. I am Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, of course, this show. You follow me on the X at Eric Balkman. Want to remind you, and we'll get into this, trust me, as our pre-show banter just informed me of this. Go to myffpc.com. myffpc.com to play in the FFPC Weekly Challenge. There is no draft in this. There is no salary cap. You choose 10 players or 12 players by Sunday's 1 p.m. kickoff, and you can play with kickers, without kickers, with defenses, without defenses, whatever. But once those lineups are set at 1, you just ride your team and watch them pile up the points. Remember, only one player per team. You can't have McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. You can't have Mahomes and Kelsey. You can't have Hurts and A.J. Brown. There is no stacking, one player per team. That's what makes it so maddening and, quite frankly, so much fun. $35 or $200 to enter. You can win up to $2,500 as well. Shout out to our producer tonight. The man behind the glass is Tyler Soto, Big T, or is it Heavy T? I think it's Heavy T. My apologies, Tyler. Heavy T is going to be producing our show tonight. And I want to welcome in our guest, co-host tonight, a guy who is a legend at Player Profiler, a guy who has done a ton of stuff with Roto Underground, the GOAT District, the list goes on and on. One of the most accomplished high-stakes players out there. One of the most knowledgeable, witty, funny. The list goes on and on. You have the total package tonight with the OG Fantasy on X. Theo Gremminger, welcome into the program. Did I vamp enough to let you get those FFPC Weekly Challenge lineups in?
Big time. I it was not for me. I'm actually jamming through. I have so many teams right now. I'm jamming through. I got a bunch of start sit decisions. Billy Muzio and I, we co-host First Class Fantasy, and today we're going back and forth on like the Joe Burrow start sit. It's kind of like a weird spot for him. So I'm going through. I'm kind of galaxy braining a couple of my Joe Burrow teams, and yeah, man, just getting after it. I'm stoked to be here. We've done this a couple times now. It's always a blast. Best sports night of the year for me because it's got the Ravens Bengals rivalry Thursday game. We've had so much trash on Thursday nights. Now we get this really, I mean, it's always good when we get these AFC North games, especially when it's Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and these teams. And then I am a huge U.S. men's national team soccer fan too, and got a huge one tonight against Trinidad. So for me, it's two TVs on. As soon as I get off of this, I'm going to be enjoying both. But yeah, man, I love chopping it up with you, Balky. We hung out in Vegas this summer. It's always a blast getting a chance to, talk about things. And yeah, I could talk with you about fantasy football for hours, man. I told you we don't need a show sheet. Right. This is just like catching up. You are the only co-host / guest of any, and I've been doing FFPC high stakes shows for well over a dozen years now. You're the only person that ever said we don't need a show sheet. Let's just tap it up. One of the things, and by the way, we're going to get into a ton of stuff tonight. Theo and I are. We're going to help you get your lineup for Week 11. Make sure if you have not downloaded the BetterCast app, make sure you're downloading that right now in the Google Play Store or the App Store because Theo's going to help me set my pregame questions for tonight's Bengals-Ravens game, and hopefully I can win. Hopefully you can win too, and hopefully we help you win. We'll also find out where Theo stands on certain players, including, but not limited to, Keaton Mitchell, Israel Abanikanda, the rookie tight ends this year, and more. And then we'll do a final start-sit session tonight while the game is going on, actually, the first quarter of the game, including Isaiah Pacheco, who I think is tricky this week, Calvin Ridley, who I think is tricky every week, and then Tyler Higbee, who is tricky for me in several leagues this week. We'll get into that as well. So one of the things I appreciate you about you, Theo, is like your social media acumen is point, like it's like spot on, right? So one of the things you pointed out to me, and I didn't even realize this, I can't remember who it was last week. Somebody on X pointed out that the Week 10 lineup, top to bottom, was terrible, especially the primetime games, right? But then you magnificent bastard, you come out and you point out
we get Ravens Bengals tonight. On Sunday night, we get Vikings Broncos, which I know seems like not all that exciting, but it could be Justin Jefferson's return. It's going to be the Joshua Dobbs show, who is the talk of fantasy football right now. And then Monday night, my God, Eagles Chiefs, set the total at 75. I'm still taking the over. It's going to be an insane night. It's insane nights of primetime games this week, dude, and I'm here for it.
It's incredible. And we only have 4 teams on bye, which is always nice.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about some weird bye-mageddon type week. And yeah, we've had so much trash on pretty much a lot of the primetime games have just been complete garbage. Like,
right.
If it wasn't for us in fantasy football or people betting on games, it's kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, the Jets Raiders game was extremely painful to watch. We've had the Bears Panthers game was just like, what are we doing? And now you get really good ones. And it's funny because the Denver Minnesota game, when Kirk Cousins went down for the season, that game kind of looked a little bit like a throwaway game, but now it's extremely exciting.
Yep.
Denver's got some juice to them as well. I mean, they're coming off they beat the Chiefs, they beat the Bills, and now they have a chance to beat, the biggest story in fantasy right now is Josh Dobbs. And Josh Dobbs has given us, 2 really, really good performances his first 2 games as starter in Minnesota, potentially getting back Justin Jefferson this week. But even without Justin Jefferson, I'm not 100% Justin Jefferson's going to play this week. I think it's kind of like up in the air. They do have an AFC North game against Chicago coming up. So, you could say, we could hold them back and, play them in the divisional game. Minnesota's obviously chasing a playoff game, a playoff spot, so it all matters to them. But Dobbs is such a story. He's so fun to watch. And, like, we're really, really high on him at Player Profiler right now. We're talking about, like, Josh Dobbs might just be the starting quarterback in Minnesota. They might have just given up a late round pick and ended up with their, like, potentially long-term starter because the offense looks so good with him. And he brings this rushing element we really haven't seen from a Minnesota quarterback for quite some time. And he's just a guy you want to root for. A cool nickname, the Pastronaut. It's just cool stuff,
All right, so a couple of things. Number one, Dom Guzzetti, who's chiming in right now, loves my hat tonight. This is a Wisconsin Herd NBA G League hat that I'm wearing tonight. I just came back from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is about a half-hour drive or so from where I am, which is about a half-hour drive southwest of Green Bay. I had to do a remote for my local radio show here in Northeast Wisconsin. The G League is Wisconsin Herd home opener is tonight, so I'm wearing this. But I'm very focused on that game. I'm very excited to see what happens. There's a lot of, like, Glenn Robinson's kid is on the team. Giannis Antetokounmpo's brother's on the team. It's really, really cool. But I do want to talk about this Dobbs thing, and I'm going to lead it off with this because you laid it out perfectly. Kirk Cousins, remind me of what his contract is. He is a free agent after this season, right?
Yeah, they've got a chance to get out of Kirk Cousins' contract. And also, there's a chance that, like, Cousins could move on. And Cousins could end up landing quite well because I think Cousins will heal, but he's going to be due for a huge payday. And there's a lot of these teams. You look at teams like the Jets and a number of other teams you could kind of think about that could say, Cousins is a guy that could take me to the playoffs. And Minnesota could have, like, pretty goodwill with Dobbs, who's going to probably take them to the playoffs right now.
Right.
So it's kind of like it could be like a passing of a ship in terms of, like, the starting quarterback. And it's completely, like, out of nowhere. Cause I think when this move first went down, we all thought that this was just like the stopgap.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Dobbs comes in, maybe takes them to the playoffs, but at least keeps them hyper competitive. And then Kirk Cousins come back from injury and then just takes over. I don't know. He's considerably younger than Kirk Cousins. He's like 7 years younger. He's got no tread on the tires, and it's taken him a while, but he could just be a late bloomer. And a lot of times these guys just don't get an opportunity. He's got an opportunity. He completely ran with it. And he's been able to, like, switch teams 3 times this year because he had success in Arizona, and he was only with Arizona for a very short period of time before, like, he's out on the field in week 1 against Washington. And he was quarterback 19 when he moved over to Minnesota. So, like, fantasy-wise, he was doing it. He had multiple games with over 40 rushing yards. I think he's got 7 games this year with more than 40 rushing yards off the top of my head. So he's got a really nice fantasy floor for us. And the guy's clicking on offense here. Like TJ Hawkinson looks fantastic with him. He's kind of elevated the tight end position in every single stop now. You had the Zach Ertz run, you had the Trey McBride start, and now you've got the TJ Hawkinson just going insane with him. So like he's done some good things for his teammates as well, which we love to see. And who knows where this offense goes when Jefferson comes back.
Chris Lude chiming in the YouTube chat saying that he could be the next Ryan Fitzpatrick, which there's a non-zero chance of it. And I guess Theo, like, I like talking about quarterbacks as much as the next guy, but I do think one of the great things about talking about quarterbacks, they affect so many other people on the team. The Vikings might have just stolen Josh Dobbs and have found a quarterback that can quarterback that team for the next half decade or so. How does that affect Jefferson, Addison, Osborne, Hawkinson? And maybe this is a case of because all those guys are there, because all these defenses that are facing the Vikings have to account for all these pass catchers, it does open things up to Dobbs. I never really so Dobbs' first start, and I can't remember who it was against, but I just remember him being flung into that scenario when the quarterback, the rookie quarterback got injured, and I forgot his name now. I can't. Jaron Hall, right, from BYU.
Yes.
Right?
So there was the plan. Yeah, the plan was to give Dobbs a week to kind of get acclimated,
right?
Learn your. It's like showing up to a job, and you'd like to be able to learn your new fellow employees' first names before you like go and like lead a presentation. So Josh Dobbs didn't even know all of his teammates' names. He certainly didn't know the offense, and it's kind of a big testament to Kevin O'Connell and also the offensive line to be able to kind of do things on the fly in that Atlanta game and go and get the win. But they showed him working on his cadence with the offensive line, like when they were off the field, like during the game, you never see that. So, it was weird. It was like they had a really good plan. The plan all went to hell, and then he still was able to come in and have an impactful fantasy performance in that first game. And the first game was like not perfect. There was the fumbles, but this past game was really, really, really productive. And hey, this week they have a chance to go 3-0 with him, and they have a chance to be one of the more exciting teams down the stretch. So we're all about it, man. We're all about it. And what does he do for his teammates, like long term?
Right.
Long term, I don't think it's a positive as compared to Kirk Cousins because you could make an argument that the scrambling ability of Dobbs makes kind of the pie grow larger for the entire offense. Maybe they become a little bit more efficient, but it was kind of an ideal scenario for Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson at the same time to have a real pocket passer like Cousins. So I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, they're all super talented guys. So maybe Justin Jefferson doesn't finish as wide receiver 1 overall next year, but he's still a dominant player in terms of making big plays. He's a target vacuum. And, Hollywood Brown had success with Dobbs as his primary target this year. And I know it's not the same sort of level of success, but the offensive line in Minnesota is much better. And now the personnel is better. So at the end of the day, it's like, we talk about tiers and it's kind of a cheap way of talking about fantasy. Like we want to nail the nuts. You don't want to just have wide receiver 7 and when you could have had wide receiver 3. But at the end of the day, like Addison, Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, they will all be fine if it's Josh Dobbs next year. They'll have potentially a very consolidated target tree in Minnesota next year, a clear hierarchy. And the other good thing is they don't really have a running back on the roster that's going to, command the ball a bunch of times. There's no high volume running back. It's all running back by committee. So things will change in the offseason, but like if everything stays the same, we're still drafting Justin Jefferson in the first round. FFPC tight end premium drafters are still going to draft Hawkinson somewhere in like the second round next year, beginning of the third. I mean, he's not going to go lower than the beginning of the third. And Jordan Addison's done enough that how it is, Bulky. Like when a rookie does this, even if we have volume concerns, it's a bet on talent situation.
Yes,
Addison's going to be a summer steamer. Like people are going to say, I need Jordan Addison on my fantasy team. Like even if the situation is like, questionable volume, he's not going to go lower than the 4th round in FFPC drafts next year.
No, you're totally right. And I think the point I wanted to make with Dobbs too is like, and Theo, I don't know how you viewed him prior to this, but like I was so surprised when he came in because I watched a lot of that Vikings game when Hall went down. I couldn't believe the mobility and the rushing talent that Josh Dobbs presented. That was something that I had never seen before. That was something that I wasn't aware that he had. And I kind of probably improperly, I wrote that off. It's just a one-off. The team wasn't prepared for him. This isn't going to continue. And yet every time I watch these Vikings games, it is continuing. Dobbs is being one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL from a fantasy standpoint, week in and week out. And perhaps the best thing about this, is he is keeping Jordan Addison relevant, TJ Hawkinson dominant, and even a guy like KJ Osborne, who should be back Sunday night. We'll see what happens there. If Jefferson's not out there, I mean, Osborne's flexible in the FFPC too. So, he's one of these rare guys that, he's sort of like a journeyman, but at the same time, he's startable every single week as a top 10 quarterback, and he's keeping everybody else not only startable, but as a weapon for you in fantasy football. A lot of things that you cannot say about most backup quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, no, you're right. And the Osborne one's interesting because I don't know if he's going to support another additional target.
I only bring up Osborne if Jefferson's out. If Jefferson plays, Osborne's an afterthought.
Yeah, no, completely agree with you on that one. And yeah, the rushing is wild because I think if you ask the average, fantasy football fan or NFL fan in general, who leads the NFL in rushing among all quarterbacks, most people are going to say, oh, it's Lamar Jackson. And they're right. But then when you go for number 2, people will pause and say, maybe it's Josh Allen, maybe it's Jalen Hurts. Right now, it's Josh Dobbs has the second most rushing yards among all NFL starting quarterbacks. So, and again, he's done it. It's not like there's been, I believe his season high in rushing was the 60-yard performance that was recent with the Vikings. But he's had a number of games that are over 40 yards. They gave him kind of a little bit more of a green light to run the ball. I think that Arizona offensive coordinator, I think the guy Drew Petzing, I think he's really good. And I think that, I think we'll see that with Arizona down the stretch here, but they put Dobbs in a really good spot to at least keep the team competitive. They lost a lot of games, but they were in every single game. They got the Dallas win, and Dobbs played great in that game. So it's kind of been a consistent thing with him. So going into the week with Dobbs, you have a decent fantasy floor based on his rushing ability. So I don't know, stranger things. When you start getting into start-sit decisions that involve Josh Dobbs, you start questioning everything now because the guys. If we objectively ranked the quarterbacks for this week, you're probably putting Dobbs right around the QB1, QB2 line, somewhere quarterback 10 or below. But then you start getting into actual start-sit decisions, and you're I kind of want to start Dobbs in a bunch of these situations. It's strange times,
and it's why we love this, and it's why it drives us nuts every so often. And I'll tell you what's driving me nuts. I look at Dom Guzzetti, who's watching us on YouTube right now. His question this week for in the Fantasy Pros Championship, this is mind-bending. I don't know how to feel about this. I'm going to throw this at you, Theo. So obviously, for all the viewers out there, Fantasy Pros Championship, it is a tight end premium format. He has to pick one for his wide receiver slot and then 2 of these guys in his flex. So he's got to start basically 3 out of these 4 guys, right? No, out of 5 guys. So you're looking at DJ Moore against the Lions, DeAndre Hopkins tonight, not tonight. DeAndre Hopkins, who is playing against the Jaguars. He's in Jacksonville this week. He's got Puka Nacua, who goes to Seattle to play the Seahawks this week. Jordan Addison, who we just spent a ton of time talking about. Jordan Addison is in the Mile High City against the Broncos on Sunday night. And then he gets Logan Thomas against the lowly New York Giants. So he's got to pick 1 receiver and then 2 other guys in the flex spot. Fantasy Pros Championship tight end premium scoring. I wish I could say something stands out here to me, Theo, but man, this is a tough decision.
Okay, so for me, I'm on the pro start DJ Moore and Justin Fields' first game back. I know there's some people a little bit scared of. I've seen the flip side is people don't know what to expect with Justin Fields in the game back. Let's stay away from everybody in the Bears. But I personally think it's going to be a DJ Moore game, so I'll start DJ Moore. I'm going to go DeAndre Hopkins because the Jacksonville secondary has been super generous. Last week we saw Kittle rip off a 60-plus yard touchdown. We saw Brandon Ayuk score a touchdown. There's been multiple games where people just shred Jacksonville. They're towards the leaders in terms of yardage given up to wide receivers. And then I'm going to go I'm going to go Puka Nacua because it's after a bye week. I think the Rams offense is going to look a lot better coming out off of the bye this week. Stafford sounds like he's on his way back, and it also sounds like I feel like when you start looking at this Rams team objectively, I think there's going to be some positive vibes down the stretch. They get Kyron Williams back soon. I think they're going to figure everything out, and it's going to be at least a little bit more consistency with Kupp and Puka Nacua. I don't think we're going to have any of these weird ebb and flow type games. So I'm going to bench Jordan Addison this week. Two things could happen. I think it could be a Justin Jefferson coming back. Hawkinson's shown a real connection. Obviously, I feel really bad, Dominic, if Addison goes out and just balls and gets behind the defense for 2 touchdowns, which could happen. But he would probably be the odd man out. And then that Washington Giants game is so weird because on paper, I think game could go so many ways. I think this might be the worst Giants team I've ever seen. And it could be a Sam Howell goes nuts type game. But you could also get a really weird, this is kind of like our play for pride. The last game was not fantasy friendly between Washington and New York. And maybe I don't want to necessarily start too many, Commanders. So I don't know. Logan Thomas, he's fine. But for your very, very good choices, Dominic, I'm going with the other guys.
I think so just to refresh here, it's Moore, it's Nacua, and who was the third guy you said?
D Hopkins. Yeah,
Hopkins.
I like Tennessee to be able to move the ball against Jacksonville. I think it's going to be a fun game.
It should be. And God, there's so many fun games.
Yeah, this is a good weekend.
And I get and we'll roll into the Devon Achane discussion right now because I got my partner, or one of my partners that I have in the KFFSC, Jim Cole, who lives out on the West Coast. He and I co-own the 3rd place overall team in the KFFSC main event right now. So it's very exciting. I've never been this high before. And so we're actually, as we're doing the show, he's blowing me up right now with Achane questions. He was limited in practice. It sounds like he is going to be making his return off IR this week. I'll lead into this right away because this is a decision that a lot of people are facing tonight. Would you hold out on Achane or would you play Keaton Mitchell against the Bengals tonight at flex?
Gosh, I would hold out. I would hold out for Achane, and I like Keaton Mitchell a lot. But I've seen on our show today, somebody asked an Achane versus Jerome Ford question, and I'm like, there's all this trepidation about Devon Achane, and it's like I'm not there at all. I think that if they were worried about him, they would have held him out. This is a guy who was maybe the best player in fantasy football for a short period of time, and now we get him back. He's going in every single lineup that I have. If you're a dynasty player and you have an opportunity, or if you're in a trading league and you have an opportunity to trade for him, go trade for him. You can't play fantasy football scared, and we can't play for floors. And at the end of the day, your same issues with him are also there with Keaton Mitchell. But I know that Devon Achane is going to play with more snaps than Keaton Mitchell. I think Keaton Mitchell sees snaps ramped up tonight. I'm not scared to play Keaton Mitchell at all. But I'm playing Devon Achane over a lot of guys this week. I think that this is he's an absolute stud. This is like Jamal Charles 2.0. And you should get punished and lose the week if you put a player like this on your bench and you're playing scared. You get what's coming to you kind of in fantasy football. I feel like you always have to be a little bit optimistic and play your studs kind of deal. Yeah. Especially when it comes to a guy like that with the home run ability.
So Achane is in there over Mitchell right now. That's what we're going to roll with. And by the way, Thomas Glaze, noted longtime FFPC high stakes player. He is in 1st place overall in the KFFSC main event, chiming in on the chat. Like, don't catch me, Balky. We don't want you catch. I get it. Listen, whatever's going to happen, what's going to happen. And we're still in the regular season. It's going to change once we get to the to the championship sprint. Things change.
I told Andrew Schellenberg and I talked about it. We were going to go down to Kentucky and draft this year. It didn't happen. I'd love to get down there one year. It looks like you guys have a blast. I know Adam Krautwurst and stuff goes down there.
Krautwurst is there. Yeah. Krautwurst, what's funny, Theo, is that I was getting, and I can't remember exactly who it was. It was 2 guys. I know for sure Kyron Williams was one, and I can't remember who the other running back was, but I was picking Kyron Williams and this other running back up in every single league, like out there, like late. And then all of a sudden I was drafting, I think it was like on a Saturday afternoon, I was drafting and somebody in my draft took Kyron Williams like a round or two ahead where I was taking him. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And I look over and my apologies, I don't know who the guy was, but guess who was sitting right next to him and coaching him? Adam bleeping Krautwurst. And he's like, yeah, no, you're not getting Kyron Williams while I'm participating in this draft. And it was true. I mean, he knew what he was doing. He has a fun time out there. We have Sunday night is always like the big party night. Like after all the drafts are done, you love it. You'd have a blast.
I'd love to get down there. One year.
One year you will. 1 year you will. Yeah. Maybe this coming year, you never know.
Maybe.
The other thing that Jim Cole was just asking me about, and this is a good one for you, Theo. I'm not facing this decision, but Jim is in one of his leagues. What would you do if it was Devon Achane versus Tony Pollard, and you only have room for one of these guys? Pollard is at Carolina this week. I think they're like 10.5 or 10-point favorites in that game. And then you have obviously Achane coming back at home against the Raiders. If you only had a room for one of these guys in your lineup, I think I'd lean Pollard here, but I think I could be sold on this either way. What do you think?
I'm going Pollard unless I'm trying to play catch up. If I'm in in a main event, or if I'm in a 350 where I'm trying to catch up points and I feel like I'm kind of out of it, like I'm a 6th place team and I'm really trying to get to that level, I might go with the higher ceiling player and just kind of roll the dice. But at the end of the day, if Pollard doesn't score a rushing touchdown this week against Carolina, I mean, people are gonna be pulling their hair out. I mean, Pollard's been such a disappointment, such a disappointment. But Carolina is an absolute train wreck. You got to like his chances of falling into the end zone this week. Even when I talk about it out loud, I want to start Devon Achane, but at the end of the day, I think that you suck it up. I think Pollard's like a top 6 play at the running back spot this week, and does just enough that gets you 75 yards and maybe scores 2 touchdowns. I think we're kind of there, but Pollard's been one of the more frustrating players in fantasy, period. People are just losing it with him this year. It's terrible.
Another terrible decision that Dom is facing tonight, and this is interesting too. We'll get into Jaylen Warren a little bit more later on in the show, but he has the opportunity to play Jaylen Warren or Deontay Johnson and over Zay Jones. I don't think Zay Jones is like with the team right now, is he?
Yeah, Zay Jones had the off the field incident,
right?
And I wouldn't count on. I would eliminate Zay Jones out of that decision anyway. I think that at the end of the day, I am going to roll with Jaylen Warren. Kenny Pickett had like 125 passing yards last week, and I think that the new formula for Pittsburgh. You also have the fact that it's going to be Pat Freiermuth coming back, and you heard Matt Canada talking about Freiermuth, and maybe Muth gives them a little bit of a boost. I like Deontay Johnson. If we're betting on one wide receiver to have like a good game in Pittsburgh, it's definitely Deontay Johnson. And I'm going to be using Deontay Johnson in some leagues, but Jaylen Warren, I'll have more predictable volume. And Jaylen Warren just looks really good. Like Jaylen Warren looks explosive. He's got the juice, and he stays fresh because they're using a lot of Najee Harris as well. But Warren's actually out snapping him now finally. And Warren is, I think very highly of Jaylen Warren. And the game is just such a low total game. In that sort of a low total environment, I think I'm going to go with Jaylen Warren over like trying to chase a wide receiver. But yeah, that game is like a really low point total. We don't know how it's going to go with like Dorian Thompson-Robinson. It's a big mystery. Like I think if you had to guess, Pittsburgh's going to bottle him up. I guess there's a theory that he could do better than like PJ Walker. I mean, it's just bad. It's just bad news for Cleveland right now. You got to think maybe they're the team that Ryan Tannehill would end up with, just because they're right there for the playoff chase and Tannehill's requesting to be released. I don't know. Trying to put the tea leaves together with this Tannehill thing. Usually, I don't think it's just like I want to leave just to leave. I think that there's always like people like, getting in people's ears and stuff in the background. Maybe Tannehill has an immediate opportunity with somebody else if that happens. Just trying to put it together. But I would go Warren. I think it's Warren.
All right, so number one, I totally agree with you on Warren over Deontay Johnson here, and I'm an idiot. I have not adjusted. I'm still living in 2017 apparently. It's Zay Flowers that he's deciding.
So even with Zay, I'm going to go Jalen Warren over Zay Flowers too.
All right,
Dan Williamson and I had a Zay Flowers start-sit decision. And shout out to Dan Williamson. He's one of the best out there. Go District guy, and also just a great high-stakes player, great auction player in FFPC. And we have a lineup where I think we're going Gus Edwards over Zay Flowers. It was just like a weird kind of gut feel thing. Like Zay Flowers, I think will end up with like a 12-point week, and I don't think he'll find the end zone. So I don't think that Zay Flowers is going to have a start that could hurt you. Whereas I think if one of those guys gets a 20-pointer this week, it's Jalen Warren.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that too. I think the process on that is perfect. I would play Warren over Johnson over Zay Flowers. So hopefully that helps you out. We kind of talked about this a little bit with Justin Jefferson. This is tricky this week with Vikings and Broncos, and especially when you're considering the receiver situation and the running back situation with Minnesota. We kind of tackled the Justin Jefferson aspect. What about Alexander Mattison versus Ty Chandler? Because if you want to play one of these guys, you're not really going to know who the quote-unquote bell cow is going to be until about 90 minutes before kickoff on Sunday evening. That's too late for a lot of people who have to make decisions at 1 p.m. or 4 or 4:30 or 4:25 or whatever it is. So Alexander Mattison didn't practice yesterday. He was out on the practice field today, Theo, and to my knowledge, he is still in the concussion protocol, which you could practice still in the concussion protocol. But when you consider Mattison versus Ty Chandler here, not everybody can take it down to the wire. Is it worth taking down to the wire if you are a Chandler owner?
Well, it's difficult because it is the Sunday night football game. I think you just have to weigh it. You have to weigh your options. I mean, if they both play, you don't necessarily want to play either one of them. I think the idea is Chandler is a play. Let's go with the matchup here. Like Denver is a dream matchup. They get shredded by the running back position. I don't think Madison's going to play, though. I realize he's back at it today. He's on the field. But this would be like almost every single time this year that it's a concussion, protocol thing. These guys don't get cleared. This would be like a real one-off if Madison was somehow cleared. Almost every other player in his situation doesn't get cleared. So I think we'll probably learn a little bit more tomorrow and Saturday. But I think at the end of the day, I think it's going to be Ty Chandler. I think Ty Chandler is going to be solidly an RB2 this week. He's a little bit exciting because of the matchup and the opportunity. And he was like neck and neck with Madison before Madison left the game this past week. And we didn't have to see, Chandler get a single target just because the game flow was, Minnesota was way up on New Orleans. They didn't have to do any real checkdowns to their running back. So I think that it's going to be Chandler, and I think you don't have to worry as much, but it's just a weird situation. It's a very weird one. Yeah.
It's very weird, but I keep going back to we always say talent above everything else. And I remember how excited we were as dynasty players and even as redraft players back last year in 2022 when we were talking about Ty Chandler.
Yeah.
The talent is there. The opportunity potentially is there. And obviously, if you have to make a call, I'm with you. I think there's only been one position player that has gotten into concussion protocol after a week and then still played the following week. And that was Luke Musgrave, the tight end from the Packers, who got placed in concussion protocol on a Thursday night game and then was able to play the following Sunday, right? That's been the only time it's happened all year. So I think there's something to be said for that. My God, I am not surprised at all. We're way behind on the show sheet for everything I wanted to get to tonight. That's okay.
We don't need throw it out.
We don't. I know we don't need the show sheet. We're gonna flow. This is a free flowing conversation, and we're gonna free flow right into the Better Cast. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a real quick break. It's a perfect time for you to download the free BetterCast app in the App Store or Google Play. I'm going to quiz Theo, not quiz him, but we're going to figure out how we stand on this Bengals-Ravens game that's due to kick off in about 40 minutes or so. He's going to help me with my over-under picks. He's going to help me with my pregame questions. He's going to help you with your pregame questions, and hopefully you can be winning big on the BetterCast app tonight. Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the Better Sports Network High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour Show presented by the FFPC. We'll be back right after this.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, and they let him be the quarterback for a long time, too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. I there's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl. And when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, yeah, well, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing, too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game that they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman, and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, like, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky, is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yards go.
From the top of the hour here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship, myffpc.com. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the HSFF Hour, the Road of His High Stakes Lowdown. He is Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler, the GOAT District. What's your official title at Player Profiler? It's very, very extensive and very impressive.
I am the director of content.
Director of content.
Yeah, director of content.
That's a lot.
It's overarching. Yeah, I'm doing. So I write like 3 articles a week. I do like so many podcasts now. I do the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast with Matt Kelly and Alan Sislowski. We only do that about once a month in the season. Then I do First Class Fantasy with Billy Muzio. That's every single week on Thursdays. We had Jeff Erickson on earlier today. I do press coverage, which is my solo pod. Jacob Sanderson was on with me this week. It was a very good episode.
Yep.
I started out a Dynasty podcast called Dynasty Life, which is kind of like press coverage, but it's Dynasty. I had Ryan McDowell on, my first guest. I have Heath Cummings on tomorrow. I'm a very active Dynasty player. My Dynasty action's almost all FFPC, and I'm not a hard guy to find. My team name is always Gremminger, so I'm not like, shout out to a couple of our friends in the high stakes realm who like to have like these incognito names. That's not me. I'm the same every time. And yeah, we're rocking. We're doing a lot of stuff. Oh, and I do Futurecast now with Matty Keenwin, which was Ray Garvin, Ray GQ, and then Cody Carpenter. We do this like once a month, and we actually had last night. We did our first. Cody came back on I do this with Matty Kiwoom, who hosts the Game Plan. Highly recommend everybody follow Matty Kiwoom. He's really, really good.
Yep.
Especially when it comes to these 2024 prospects. But Cody, Matty, and I did a mock draft for the 2024 class, Superflex. That was a lot of fun. We did it last night, so we're starting to get after it. Never too early to do that. So yeah, it's a lot going on. And then in terms of director of content, like I've been able to recruit some top-notch podcasters to come and podcast with us at Player Profiler.
Yep.
We had First and 15 with a B-Bag Batoba and Dio Adesai. We had, the deep end. And then we also have Chris Vaccaro, who's one of the better high-stakes players in the country. Not a big FFPC guy, but a well-known high-stakes player.
Mm-hmm.
Nando DeFino and Chris Vaccaro, they came over and they do the Fantasy Empire with us. So it's been, and we have the first, Spanish language podcast we've ever done at Player Profiler. We have Mauricio Gutierrez doing Player Profiler on Espanol, which has been really cool to have our product, now be in Spanish. We're reaching we're actually reaching a lot of other countries now that we really weren't having. And then, you obviously get some bilingual people in the United States. So that was a really cool thing to start. So it's been kind of like an overarching role, but we want to have the most impactful content that we can. And I want to put out the most helpful. I think I write the best waiver wire column anywhere because I think all high stakes people read it. And if you play in high stakes fantasy, most of these waiver wire columns are not for you.
Right.
If you go pick up your ESPN and you say that guy was drafted in my main event in the 12th round, why are you talking to me about him? But I look at guys who are lower rostered. Mine is very extensive, and then I do a video that goes along with it. So I like to say that I'm putting out content. I'm always a player first, and the people who play FFPC and a couple of their rivals are the people who speak my language. So I'm kind of writing for them, and then I've had been able to do some other articles that can help people that might be in your regular home league that might have a 15 man roster league. So it's been cool, Balky. It's very busy. This time of year is very, very busy, but I love it. It's a grind, and we're just trying to put out very, very cool stuff that can help you win.
I think what's great, and I want to just chime in on this to give you some props in your waiver wire column. I think to your point, and there's a lot of websites out there that aren't mainstream, like ESPN or CBS or anything like that, that I have checked over the years when I'm placing my waiver bids on Tuesdays and Wednesdays or what have you. What's great about yours is I feel like I'm always looking next level, not to the point, and this is going to sound douchey and a little hard to understand, but I think, and maybe the fact I say it's hard to understand makes it sound douchey in and of itself, but I'm always looking for waivers for the following week, right?
Yeah.
I feel like, the hot running back pickup, the hot wide receiver pickup, that's great. I should know how much to be bidding on, how aggressive I should be able to be bidding on these guys based on what people are telling me. However, what's great about you is I feel like I'm getting a heads up the week before on a lot of these guys. I think about guys like Ty Chandler. I think about guys like Demario Douglas. The list goes on and on, where I'm not only getting these players, but I'm getting them at bargain basement prices the week before they blow up, right? And you're human, you make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But I feel like you are as dialed in as anybody out there as far as a high stakes player goes that is producing content, and that's what makes it so valuable. And I would never point this out to you, Theo, but I'm going to point it out to you right now. It's probably to your own detriment because you're competing against a lot of these guys that are reading the column.
Yeah, so people talk about that, and I really do appreciate that. And that's one thing I really value is Fab is a weapon. So we were ahead of schedule with Trey McBride in a couple of my columns, and we were ahead of schedule with Logan Thomas. Mm-hmm. We were ahead of schedule with a bunch of these running backs. Billy Muzio and I on First Class Fantasy were begging people to add Keaton Mitchell for weeks.
Yes.
And
in August, in August, you guys were talking about this. Yeah.
So we were all about Keaton Mitchell in August. And this is not and again, I don't get everything correct, but I feel like when you try to be a week ahead on waivers, last week I had a sleepers video. And I drop it every single Friday. You can check the receipts. It's not like I can, change it up. Mm-hmm. But I do my waivers article, and then I do my sleepers article and video. And last week I had Ty Chandler and Noah Brown. Noah Brown, it was easy. He had 150 yards. But we've had him higher up than a lot of websites did in terms of how much you should, how much you should value him. And then Ty Chandler was one where I'm just pounding the table. Just add Ty Chandler for $1. The secondary, this is one thing. If you play KFFC or FFPC or some of your competitors that I will not name on your show.
Well, you can name them. That's fine. NFFC, FFWC, that's fine. Yeah.
So I'm always trying to be good like that because I know who pays the bills. But at the end of the day, like if you play in those leagues this time of year, you only have like a month left.
Yeah.
So you need to be super active on that secondary waiver wire run. There's been multiple seasons where I've had success adding guys for $1 here, $1 there on that secondary waiver wire run. And I'd like to think that my waiver wire column and also what I do with the sleepers article, like it's kind of like a waivers of the future type thing. Mm-hmm. But Balky, if you can get a guy like Ty Chandler for, legitimately you spent $25 out of $1,000 budget. Some leagues he was going for $1. Some leagues going for 75. If you were in a league with Billy Muzio, you'd have to probably spend $65. Yes. But this week, if he's available in your league, he was going for 50% or literally let whatever you have left. So if you're able to get like that sort of a discount, it's like you're buying wins at this time of the year. So I really value like being able to kind of see what's going on and try to be a week ahead with waivers. Anybody can react to what happened this past Sunday and say, go add this guy. But if we can look at like the snap shares, the increased opportunity, maybe coaches talk up a guy and just be a little bit ahead. Like we've had a really good run, Player Profiler. We were on Jaleel McLaughlin. And when it comes to Dynasty, everybody's going to say, whoa, bro, Devon Achane went in the first round of my league. But at Sonic Truth Podcast, we were begging you to go trade for Devon Achane before he had his opportunity. Devon Achane was a guy that we were really, really pounding the table for. So we're not going to get them all right, but I don't mind getting them wrong if I'm recommending these like cheap guys. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to, if I'm wrong, I'm going to cost you $10 a fab or $25 of your $1,000 budget. So Balky, I appreciate you reading my column. I think that means a lot to me. And I get a lot of DMs from people who play high stakes and they really enjoy it. So it's kind of become like a labor of love. John Daigle's a friend of mine. He does a very good waiver wire column as well. It's like the waiver wire is like a grind and a half. So I've been doing it for years now. I did it on Breakout Finder when I first was starting to do content. And then it's become like a thing with Player Profiler. And I just don't want to give it up. It's kind of like it kills you though. The waiver wire column is like the most amount of work of any of these columns. The other columns I can do, it takes so long to write, all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's super fun. And I think it helps with my process for being a player. And like a lot of people will say this to Billy and I, like if you say you like a guy in the redraft process, I'm just going to snipe you. But if you snipe me and you want to reach and take my guy, then it's going to create like another opportunity for me at another part of the draft. So at the end of the day, like if you're drafting FFPC main events and you go to Vegas, like you sit down at the table, 10 guys at your table are going to really know what they're doing. There's not like a lot of dead money when you get to these main event drafts. So at the end of the day, people know what they're doing. And I'm just going to have to do as good a job as I can trying to build my team just like they are. So I'm not too worried about people knowing that, hey, Theo was on Ross St. Brown really, really hard all summer long. I had a couple people being like, what are you doing, man? But, what are you going to do?
Aggression gets rewarded. Aggression gets rewarded for sure in this. And by the way, John Daigle, you mentioned him. He was last week's co-host, and Dom Guzzetti pointing out his gift on the last podcast that this time last week was his favorite local food hangouts in Chicago. Well, like if anybody comes to Chicago, he tells them where, like he told that it's like, this is the burger place you want to go to. This is the place you want to go to for pizza. Like it was so great. Getting back to just real quick, and I know we got to get the better cast here in a second, but I think, and Theo, you've been playing high stakes fantasy football a long time, but I think for me, one of the toughest things, there's always tough things. One of the toughest things for me, and I still struggle with it to a certain degree, is looking not at this week in fantasy when I'm placing my bids, but looking 2 weeks ahead and 3 weeks ahead. And the trick, it's a nuanced thing, right? Because you don't want to look so far ahead because so much stuff can happen in that time. But at the same time, you don't want to be so short-sighted and looking in week 7 to what's going to happen in week 8, understanding that week 9 is going to affect your teams. And this is how you can get in on the bargain basement price for some of these players. That's what I think makes your waiver column so advantageous for people to take advantage of. Number one, because it's going to help you for especially high stakes fantasy. And number two, you really can't get this kind of stuff anywhere else.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and we always say it's like easier said than done because I'm
totally
a pretty I'm a high volume player, and it's not always like by design. Like it just goes off the rails some summers, and you end up drafting a lot more teams. I split teams with Nelson Sousa, Biplap Mandel, Dan Williamson. Like I end up getting Andrew Schellenberg, and I end up getting like really good partners. So those guys help. But then I end up doing my own teams too, and it's like it goes off the rails. So I always try to say be a week ahead on waivers, and I think that it's easier said than done because again, you have to win each week, and you sometimes have to be short-sighted, and you sometimes have to be risky. This time of year as well with the amount of fab you
it's a
spend.
nuanced thing, right, Theo? It's totally nuanced. Like you have to know when to pivot, when to hold strong, when to go for broke, when to pull your chip. Like there's never one answer. That's the thing that makes it so difficult and so fun.
But I do think trying to be a week ahead, especially when you have like the crazy bye weeks, those are really the weeks where you can look over your roster. Especially for the one-off positions, be willing to let go of a couple of one-off position guys and know like when you're going to cut a guy. Like, a guy like Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is a guy that I think in a perfect world I would love to keep on every single team, but holding him through this bye week might be something that would necessarily hurt me. And then if I look to we have a bye week coming up, which is going to be another 6-teamer coming up. The NFL gives us a break as fantasy managers. We don't have any bye weeks the week of Thanksgiving, but then the following week, week 13 is going to be a 6-teamer. So if a guy is on your bench and you're kind of 50-50 on them, you might want to let them go a week early. And then, if somebody picks them up, they're not going to have them for that following week anyway. So like there's little nuanced things you can do, but at the end of the day, it's not conservation of fab at this point is not as important as it was earlier in the season. But I think if you can just be a week early with your teams and kind of have like a 2-week window with how you're using your fab instead of a 1-week window, that's kind of the best way to play the game. But again, if you've got 40 teams, 30 teams, that's easier said than done too, Balky.
Yes, totally it is. But you're right. I mean, like the advantage is being ahead of everybody else. And if you can continue that advantage where every single week you're a week ahead of everybody else, you're going to be advantaged in the quality of your team, the quality of your roster, and in as far as fab goes, you're not going to be blowing as much as a lot of these other people. Okay, we could talk about this literally for the next 3 hours, and we need
to get Darren Armani on as well. We can go really nuts.
Darren was on like a month or so ago, and because like he would tell me that the best part of his Fantasy Mojo website is during drafting season. And I was trying to sell people like, no, you got to keep your subscription going and you got to check to see what he's doing with fab results and everything. And he came on the show and he's like, listen, my thing is like a pre-draft, like mine is drafting season. That's when you want to have my subscription. I'm like, Darren, sell yourself. I'm selling you. Like it is a great tool to have year round. It's fantastic.
That's what we said to Darren often. Like Darren came on First Class Fantasy, he's come on the GOAT District, he's come on everything. And it's like, Darren, like you're like a saint. You're giving out this product for such a reasonable amount of money where there's guys in FFPC who would pay 10 times what you're charging. And I said, I don't think your numbers would go down if you like tripled up your price. And he's like, yeah, well, he's just such a good dude. And also shout out to Darren. I compete with Darren every single year. We do the Hardway draft with a really, really good group of managers in that. Abibag Batoba, Noah Riddell, Dwayne McFarland drafts with us. That's a really, really fun league. So I've gotten to know Darren a lot over the years. Highly recommend Fantasy Mojo. But, he is right on one thing. When we're in the summertime, I look at Fantasy Mojo every single day.
Every day.
In the summer.
Every day.
Absolutely. It's like Google at my house. It's like my homepage.
Fantasy Mojo, the homepage. I love it. Let's get into the Better Cast here, Theo, before we run out of time in this segment. As a reminder, the Better Sports Network is gamifying Thursday Night Football on the BetterCast app. You can check out Moose and Keith's game preview of the Bengals and Ravens tonight, including some of their top picks and some of their top plays. You can also compete in our free contest by answering pregame questions which are live now in the BetterCast app. Theo and I are going to get to them in just a moment. Tonight during the game, there's going to be more questions. You can answer those questions to predict what's going to happen and test your NFL knowledge with a lot of NFL trivia in that as well. You can chat with all the great people that we have hanging out in the BetterCast about the big plays, the top performers, the boss, so on and so forth. Subscription? No, not necessary. Purchase? Again, not necessary. This is always free to play. Watch Thursday Night Football tonight. Game kicks off in about 20 minutes. Play our free contest and win tickets. The more questions you answer, the more tickets you win, and then you can redeem those tickets for authentic National Football League signed gear and collectibles. All you have to do is go in the App Store or Google Play, download the BetterCast app for free. Just have to be 18 years or older. Theo, let's get into it tonight. And I am going to make all my plays on the BetterCast app tonight based on what you tell me and your feelings about this game. We're going to kick things off with Joe Mixon. His total set for rushing yards is at 54.5. Would you rather go over or under that total against the Ravens tonight?
I'm going to go with the over for Joe Mixon rushing yards. I think that this is going to be a game that's going to be tight. I think that they're going to lean a little bit more on Mixon than maybe they'd like to in most weeks. I think it's a good opportunity for him to get over 54.
Okay, so you're saying over there. Now, what if we flip it to the other side? No Keaton Mitchell question here, but what about Gus Edwards? 47.5 rushing yards is what his total set. The Bengals, I believe, are the favorite tonight by about 3.5 points. I'll get into that in a second. So you would think, and this is something that Jim Cole brought up with me, talking about Lamar Jackson versus CJ Stroud. He has a feeling tonight that the Ravens are just going to run and run and run. And if that's the case, Gus Edwards is smashing this 47.5 total for rushing yards. Theo, how do you see his fantasy prospects going for rushing yards tonight?
I want to say under for Gus Edwards, but Dan Williamson and I are splitting a team, and he's got me on starting Gus over Zay Flowers, so I've got to go over for Dan Williamson.
Okay.
But I think it's going to be close to the number, and I do think that there's going to be multiple Ravens involved in running the ball.
Yes.
I think you're going to see Lamar Jackson. You're going to see a little more Keaton Mitchell. I mean, Gus Edwards has the, if there's a short yardage situation, if there's a goal line situation, it's Gus Edwards. But I do think we see a little bit more Keaton Mitchell. Justice Hill has not been benched. And Lamar Jackson in this sort of a close game, he's going to be a real threat to run for a high amount of yards as well. So begrudgingly, I'll take the over.
We got the over on that. And Dom Gazzetti, I was also chiming in. Corey Doherty in the YouTube chat has a question. Gus Edwards or Noah Brown? I'm of the opinion, Theo, and I don't know how you fall in on this. I don't think Noah Brown's playing this week.
I don't either.
You got to play Edwards tonight, right?
Yeah, he was out of practice. It's already going to be the first game for Noah Brown where he's playing. They have like a full
with Collins
wide receiver core. Yeah,
right.
But yeah, if Noah Brown was healthy, I would want to go Noah Brown. But Gus Edwards is a viable play for you, and it would be hard to take. It's like a bird in a hand thing. He's already pretty close to Noah Brown if you were having to rank guys this week because of his ability to score touchdowns. I mean, Gus Edwards has 7 rushing touchdowns right now in the year. He's a career high already. He's like having that weird kind of Jamal Williams like season, LeGarrette Blount like season, where he just keeps, it's always weird. People always say it's the most difficult thing to kind of bet on touchdowns in fantasy. But Gus is falling in the end zone a lot. So I'll go with Gus Edwards just because of the health of Noah Brown. But what a run by Noah Brown. Balky, it's crazy. He's like 12th, I think, in receptions over 20 yards right now. And he's only played in like 250 snaps.
Yeah.
And the other guys on that list are all like 450 or 500 snaps. So like the 2 outliers on the catches over 20 yards list are Justin Jefferson and Noah Brown are the 2 outliers who played like lower snaps. It's insane. It speaks volumes to CJ Stroud, who's just incredible talent, who elevates whoever around him. So not to get you off the Bengals Ravens game, I'm sure we'll talk about CJ Stroud a little more.
We'll get back to that in a second. Dom also saying he's in a 20-team league and he can either play Michael Wilson or Noah Brown. Well, you can wait on this one, but I would lean towards Wilson because I just don't think Noah Brown's playing this week. Okay. Yeah. Now, you mentioned that Gus Edwards has 7 rushing touchdowns this year. Ironically, or maybe not ironically, 7 touchdowns is exactly what the Ravens have given up as far as passing goes this year. Only 7 passing touchdowns on the season. Now, this doesn't necessarily reflect directly on Ja'Marr Chase tonight, but his total for receiving yards on the BetterCast app is set at 83.5. Do you fall on the over or the under with Chase in a game where T. Higgins, we know, is not playing, Theo?
Gosh, it's a really tough one, right? I think
83.5 is a tough number.
It's a really tough number. It's not very advantageous number. They're saying that he's going to have a good game.
And how healthy is he, Theo, right now?
I mean, I think that he's got a lot of toughness, and Chase has shown the ability to play through injury. We were worried about it last week, and he still finds the end zone, still goes over 100 yards receiving last week. So, gosh, I hate betting against. I feel like all of my answers have been overs, but I hate betting against Ja'Marr Chase because at the end of the day, they're gonna need him tonight. I think they're gonna have to scheme for him. He might not find the end zone, but I think this could be a game where he catches 8 or 9 balls, and I like his chances of going over that 75 yards, and he's good enough player. If you told me it was 75 yards, 77 yards, I'd be all about it.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think I'm right there on the over as well. And I'm just, I'm a fantasy football player, so I'm optimistically wanting overs on all these totals too, Balky. I'm not my action is my fantasy teams tonight. I don't have any action on the game. So take this with a grain of salt, guys. I'm rooting also for the overs here too.
Well, take it with a grain of salt, but I think I feel more comfortable about the over than you do. So Chase. So we're gonna go over on that. Now, what about his real life teammate, Tyler Boyd? Again, no Higgins tonight. You still have the Trenton Irwins of the world and Irv Smiths of the world polluting the Bengals passing offense. Tyler Boyd on this in this instance, he only needs to hit 41.5 to go over. You like the over, or do you like the under with Tyler Boyd here tonight, Theo?
It's funny because I actually like the tertiary guys, like the Irwins and the Tanner Hudsons.
Tanner Hudson's another one, yeah.
So these kind of shady, out of nowhere guys. I think Boyd's going to be right around his number. I think Boyd is. I'll take the under. I think Tyler Boyd's going to have 5 catches, 37 yards, and then one of these other guys, probably finds the end zone as a receiver. I think Irwin could have had 2 touchdowns last week, and he's played very well in the games that Higgins has missed. Last week, he had 2 catches, 65-ish yards, touchdown, and then in week 5, when Higgins was out, he had another game. I think he had 8 catches that week. So, I like Irwin a little bit. So we'll see. And Hudson's probably the sneakiest bet for a touchdown.
Yes.
It's so weird because I wrote about him in my waiver wire column and I wrote about him in my video, and I'm like, oh yeah, Tanner Hudson. And I think when people hear of a Tanner Hudson, they're like, oh, this must be some young guy on the Bengals. No, he's old too. He's just getting an opportunity. He's 29 years old. And it's just, I think he's got 12 targets over the last 2 games combined. So Hudson's starting to be a thing. That's not I think it's more of a knock on Irv Smith and the other tight ends on Cincinnati more than anything. But Hudson's, he's got a role, 12 targets at the tight end position. You can't ignore.
I hear the name Tanner Hudson, Theo, and the first thing that comes to mind is a second-year undrafted free agent quarterback from Stanford that has already played on 4 practice squads in the NFL. That's what I think of when I hear the name Tanner Hudson. That's
wine and cheese type first name for sure. Yeah, he's enjoying a brie and pear sandwich or something before the game.
He was at the Catalina wine mixer. Yeah, you know that
he
for
was.
sure.
He was. That's where he gets his nut at the
he makes his nut. Yeah, he sells helicopters in the off seseason. Helicopter rentals, basically. All right, let's get into Zay Flowers here. Over or under 52.5 receiving yards. I've had Zay Flowers. I probably have Zay Flowers on not quite a third of my teams, probably 20%. I would say 25%. And the last couple of weeks I've benched him, Theo, and I've been fairly happy about it. And I only went 5 for 72 this past week. But the thing with Flowers is Andrews is healthy. It seems like they've found something with Mitchell. Edwards is running hot. 52.5 to me seems low, but I guess I can see how the under would play. To me, I kind of lean towards the over a little bit here. What say you?
Over 52.5. It's not a big number for him to hit, and he could still have a 11, 12-point PPR night, and nobody's that happy, but 52 seems a little bit low. Odell's weird right now because Odell had 7 targets 2 games ago, and then Odell had 2 targets. He had 2 targets last week, but he had a touchdown in back-to-back games. He's the one to kind of keep an eye on. But yeah, I'll take the over with Zay Flowers. It seems like a very, very, very low number. I'm over on Zay.
Okay, now you say that's a low number for Zay Flowers. To me, then you got to be over on Mark Andrews, 54.5, right? Because that's where his total is set.
I guess I'm over on the game total, Bulky, because I keep liking all these numbers.
All the overs.
I hate. It sounds like a complete square to take the over on all these things, but I think it's going to be a little higher, like a little bit more of a game that has offensive production than maybe these totals kind of indicate. But yeah, it's hard to take Mark Andrews with that low of a number. Yeah, I'm probably on Andrews as well. So I guess I'm over on Lamar Jackson's passing numbers as well.
So we're gonna roll with the over on Mark Andrews here. Now, Joe Burrow is interesting. His passing total tonight is set at 258.5. He has hit that total, over that total, Theo, in each of the last 3 weeks. In fact, he has hit over 258.5 passing yards in 4 out of the last 5 weeks. But that's been it. So he has missed on 258 passing yards I take that back. He hit 259 against the Rams, so he was over there. But he's gone under that total 4 times so far this year. This is a Ravens passing defense that's pretty good. You've been over on a lot. Does Burrow qualify for an under here?
I kind of like the under here for the Burrow totals. Like you talked about, like that arm sleeve, we kind of don't know where they're at. And
the Bengals deleted a post on that or something.
Which is it's super weird and like secretive. It's super weird. And I don't know. The game kind of scares me a little bit. I like the Mixon overs. And I like the Boyd unders. So I guess I'm kind of on the Joe Burrow under. I think this is probably more like let's call it 225 passing yards.
Okay.
And full disclosure, during our commercial break, I went in a couple of lineups, and I'm starting Sam Howell over Joe Burrow. So that's kind of like I'll put my money where the mouth is on a pretty high stakes dynasty team.
I had a local fantasy football show earlier this afternoon, and I actually said, I'm like, as far as Burrow goes, I mean, I like Sam Howell better than him this week. I like Brock Purdy. I think you can make a case that Murray and Fields should be started over Joe Burrow this week. Like I am very, very bearish on Joe Burrow tonight. Now, you said 225 for passing yards for Joe Burrow. Interestingly enough, Lamar Jackson has his passing yards set in the BetterCast app at 224.5 tonight. He has not hit 224.5 since October 22nd against the Lions, a game that they won by 32. He has only hit that total 3 times so far this season. He gets the Bengals tonight, a team that he faced in week 2, where he threw for 237 yards. I know the Ravens were a different team back then, but still, we should bring that up. 224.5, Lamar Jackson. Theo, where are you falling in on this one?
Let's go over for Lamar. And let's say Lamar actually has a really, really big game tonight, combined yardage. I think he rips off a couple of long runs. I think he gets, your 235. He's probably similar passing yardage as the first game. And I like the Ravens to win the game on the road. And I think that this is an important game for them. Again, I don't think Cincinnati's at full strength on either side of the ball. And I think it's going to catch up with them. They've kind of turned their season around, got it together. But I think Baltimore goes in there and gets the win.
The last thing we'll bring up here, or the last 2 things we'll bring up. The total points on the BetterCast app is set at 45.5 in this game. I just looked at it right now. I see the total has moved up to 46.5. Are we still taking the over here at 46.5, or are we taking the advantage of taking the under here at this point, Theo?
Over 27-24 Ravens.
27, which is exactly what Dom Gazzetti said. He said 27-24.
Okay, so
Ravens.
I'll change it so we're not on the exact same one. I'll say 28-23 Ravens. So me and
Okay.
Dom just a little different.
You're a little different, but you're both on the over. You're both on the over tonight.
On the over.
And you both said the Ravens tonight, and this is what's interesting on the Bettercast tonight. So we're always trying to win the points, obviously, to get the tickets. You get 20 points if you say the Ravens win this game, but if you say the Bengals win, you only get 10 points, and the Ravens are 3.5-point favorites. I don't know if this is a glitch. I don't know what's going on with it. We have to take the Ravens to get the 2-1 points on this, Theo, right?
Bet the house, guys. It's Ravens tonight. Easy.
We are locked in with all our pregame questions now on the Bettercast app. Remember, you can join the Bettercast app now. Just download it for free in Google Play and the App Store, so you can participate and compete against myself and everybody in the Bettercast app tonight. A couple of quick things to get to before we go to our break here. Dom Gazzetti, can you guys go another hour? No, we cannot. It is not allowed. We are done at 9 p.m. Tonight. I apologize for that. It is what it is. Now, the other aspect here, War Eagle 20178 has a decision. Hanging out on Twitch watching us. James Cook, James Conner, or Isaiah Pacheco. He can only play one of those players this week, one of those running backs, Theo. Who are the two that he's benching? Well, who's the player that he's starting? You have James Conner, who is going up against the Houston Texans on the road. Isaiah Pacheco is at home, but it's against that tough Eagles defense. And, oh, by the way, James Cook at home against a tough Jets rush defense. Which one are you starting?
James Cook, James Conner, and who's the third?
It is Isaiah Pacheco.
Gosh, so, we talked about the high total in the Philadelphia game.
Mm-hmm.
That's a game where it could be a shootout. Philadelphia is just a very difficult team to run on. So I think you're relying on Pacheco to catch a few passes, which he's done in several games. I'm going to say, for me, the guy who I'm very intrigued by this week is actually James Conner. Because James Conner had 16 carries his first game back. This game seems like it could be a very high-scoring game. I think Houston, Arizona is going to be very, very fantasy-friendly. This could be one of the more fantasy-friendly games of the week. Like the James Cook one is interesting because we see an offensive coordinator change where there's Joe Brady. So you could go two ways here. Does Joe Brady kind of cut loose a little bit and try to get James Cook super involved? Or is he a little bit tight because it's his first game as head coach against a defense who's very opportunistic in the Jets, and James Cook has fumbled the ball recently. So can he truly trust James Cook this week? Like, James Cook to me is kind of a tilting guy this week. I have a good amount of James Cook. I would love to see him just unleash James Cook. But for me, like I like James Conner. I think James Conner to me this week, he comes back. Last week he didn't have to catch a pass. And I think this week, even with Kyler Murray, who's not really a huge check down to running backs type guys, I think you'll see James Conner catch, 3 passes based on the matchup. I think he's going to see 16, 17, 18 carries, and I think you're going to see him find the end zone this week. So I'm on James Conner. I'm starting him where I have him.
Connor's the guy for me here. There's just way too many question marks with James Cook. That's a total, by the way, that is barely scraping 40 points. You're looking at the other two games. Isaiah Pacheco is at home with a total of 45.5, where they are giving away 2.5 points. And then you look at James Conner, the total in that game, 48.5. So I think it comes down to Conner or Pacheco. I'm going to lean towards Conner here because of a lot of the points that you just mentioned. And, we don't know I just got a gut feeling that Cardinals-Texans game is going to be one of the more entertaining ones of the week. We're all looking forward to Eagles-Chiefs, right, on Monday night. And I think that's going to be great. But that Cardinals-Texans game to me is so compelling. And I think that's why you pick Conner.
I think that's my number one. From a pure NFL perspective, Kansas City, Philly doesn't get better than that. We'll give it to them, but it's an island game. But in terms of the Sunday games, Houston, and it's so funny, Balky, because if we had podcasted, 2.5 months ago, and we said, what's
we'd
the
hate
game
it.
that we want? Yeah, we'd say this is a throwaway game. Nobody cares about this game. And now it's like these, Stroud has made all the players around him fantasy relevant. Kyler Murray is one of the more exciting players for us as fantasy managers in the game, and he looks completely back. And now they go head to head. This game seems like a shootout. Two teams that actually really care as well. I think both these teams will have a really good approach. So I'm all about that game. I'm super excited about that game.
I'm super excited for the remainder of this show. We are way late for a break. We're going to get to one right now, but we have been grinding. We've been crushing it. It's been so much fun. We barely scraped the surface of everything I wanted to get to tonight, but I promise you, there is going to be more stuff on the Steelers running back situation with Harris and Warren. We're going to talk more about Michael Carter and his new landing spot in Arizona, Jackson Smith and Jigba, just a few of the names on the docket when we find out where Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler stands on certain players going on in Week 11 of the fantasy football season. I'm Eric Balkman, Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler in the GOAT District. Of course, you are watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the FFPC right here on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere.
From the Hometown Hero series, Zach Parise.
That is a very nice card, and that's one I'm probably have to organize a little trade ski with you, because I would actually like that card.
You got downtown Newark in the background. I mean, Newark has never looked so good.
No, it is not.
We'll put that back up on the screen. I just want to have a penny sleeve ready, and yes, we can absolutely work out a little trade ski for that, because that belongs in a Devil Fans collection right there.
I'll trade you the Braden Schneider rookie card for it.
Done.
There we go. The first card-for-card trade on Rip and Riff history. And it was that easy.
It was that easy. That's because, you know what? Because neither one of us are jerks. And it's the same thing when we try and do fantasy trades. Like, we don't try and screw each other. We have conversations. If there's a fit, there's a fit. If it's not, it's not. We don't try and, take the other one over the barrel. So there you go. In a penny sleeve. Hometown hero, Zach Parise. He was among the league's most productive goal scorers in 06-07 and followed up with a terrific regular season with an even more impressive postseason. And then they talk about what he did in the first round series against Tampa Bay that year. So that's off to the side for you.
That's true. And, if this is it for his career, he had a hell of a career.
He did.
Hopefully he comes back one more year with the Islanders, but if he doesn't, hell of a run.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, 16 minutes past the top of the hour. I have to get my Amazon Prime warmed up to a fare thee well here so we can check out this game as we bring you live coverage as we are your second screen experience or third screen, depending upon what you got going for fantasy tonight, as we take in this great AFC North showdown between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens live here on Fantasy Football Night in America. This is the Better Sports Network that you're watching, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the FFPC. And oh my God, Theo, it's already off and running. Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler joining me tonight, director of content there. And I believe hosting a podcast basically once every 12 hours from what you told me before.
It's gone off the rails, bulky, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. Game is underway. Ravens taking the opening kickoff here, or the opening possession. We got about 40 seconds into the game. The Ravens already have it 1st and 10 from about their own 39-yard line. We'll give you updates on that as it goes forward here. But for right now, we have to bring up a couple of things. Number one, the FFPC Weekly Challenge. It is here for Week 11 in the NFL. There is no draft. There is no salary cap. No convoluted rules. It is the same format as our popular FFPC World Famous Playoff Challenge, which will be launching next month. 10-team, 30-team, 100-team contests, and results are being determined by the total points accumulated by each individual lineup entry. Pick your players. Just watch them ride through the rest of the week. You can play in the classic format with kickers and defenses, the slim format without kickers and defenses. Enter for as little as $35. There's a contest for everyone. You can win up to $2,500. New users will get $25 off their first FFPC entry of $35 or more. Just use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com. That's ALARM at myffpc.com. Okay, we just got a message from Dom Guzzetti on YouTube. Mark Andrews got a big catch from the onset. The Ravens are marching here. Looked like Zay Flowers just made a big play here as the Ravens are entering Bengals territory. We'll give you more on that. Theo, Jalen Warren said, was it yesterday or 2 days ago, that Mike Tomlin told him that he was the starting running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward. And I feel like this should be shockwaves for all of us playing high-stakes fantasy football. But I also think we kind of treated Jalen Warren as the starter now for what, a month plus? Yeah. This shouldn't really change anything, right?
No, I mean, you were already using him. And Jalen Warren's had 6 RB2 weeks out of 9. I mean, that's pretty good for where you drafted him. And, like, Najee Harris is not going to go away. And I've been a huge Jalen Warren guy. Anybody who follows me and my content knows that I've been, like, pounding the table for Jalen Warren to get more opportunities. But at the end of the day, he's helped out by the fact that Najee Harris still has, you know, this role. As crazy as that is, like, I think the split should be more like 60-40 than like what we saw recently was like a 51-49. But at the end of the day, like, it doesn't really matter that Harris is getting the work for like your Warren shares, because Warren's getting way more receptions and Warren has the more like explosive runs. So like Najee Harris, it's funny how his career has gone for us in the way we look at him in fantasy. Like Najee Harris, his rookie season is like a league winner type. You were drafting him at the beginning of the second round. I know I had one really good main event team with Andrew Schellenberg where we took him in the beginning of the second in that year, and he killed it with his receiving ability. The guy had like 74 receptions as a rookie, and then it goes down from 74 down to 41, and then this year he only has 18 receptions. Jalen Warren has 31 receptions, and yards per carry, it's Najee Harris has 4, and 4 yards per carry is actually the most he's ever had as a pro, whereas Jalen Warren's at 5.1. So at the end of the day, I'm probably going to have more like it's going to be some predictable volume for Najee Harris. Najee Harris still has, you know, touchdown potential, but Jalen Warren's going to have like the higher value touches. And Billy and I talked about this today on First Class Fantasy. Like, you can start them. You can't start them both together. There's very few, and I don't know why you would have them both together on your team. I do have some dynasty teams where I actually have Warren and Harris, because Warren didn't cost you anything in dynasty. He was an undrafted free agent, and it was like found money. I got him as a waiver wire ad, like most people did. Maybe if you were in an FFPC league, he was a 7th round pick in your rookie draft, but he was overlooked as a rookie. You were able to get him. So I have a lot of teams that it's Harris and Warren together for dynasty, but for redraft, where they were being drafted and they had like kind of converging ADPs, nobody has them on the same team. So you don't have to worry about that. But in dynasty, you can't use them both in the same lineup, because Pittsburgh has the offense could go south on any particular week. But if you have them code independently from one another, they're fine to use as a RB2 or flex every single week. It's running back 28 and running back 29 on the season. They're back to back. And we would probably say that Warren is trending up, but Harris again has played well the last few weeks. So we had like those really frustrating Najee Harris weeks. Those weeks have kind of gone away. The last 2 games have been very, very good for him.
We got a developing situation in this Ravens-Bengals game. Mark Andrews made a catch, got down about the 5-yard line, 4-yard line. Looked like he was just short of a first down. However, Amazon has gone to commercial as Mark Andrews is down. He has not gotten up yet.
Gosh.
That's what we're looking at right now. No further information. We'll probably have some more information for you in the next couple of minutes here.
Oh, man, that's a killer. That's a killer for me.
It is. We'll see. But it could be just something he's shaking up. I don't know. I didn't see the play. It could be a wind knocked out of him. Who knows? But we'll be bringing that up in the next couple of minutes here. Okay. Let me throw this at you, talking about Steelers running backs, Theo. Najee Harris is a rich man's Gus Edwards. Agree or disagree?
No, I mean, yeah,
disagree.
Disagree. He's a little bit. He's a little bit more. His game's a little bit more nuanced than the Gus bus.
Okay, and that's fine, and that's kind of what I was getting at. So, and I think like one of my busts of the year, based on where he had
out
to take
for the game. Somebody just said in the chat.
Oh my God, yeah, 42-cent hike. Saying he's out for the game. I have not
Andrews
seen that
so
yet.
Many big spots right now. This is like on air tilting, Bulky. I'm like, I got Andrews in a ton of big spots right now. I got a lot of money riding on Mark Andrews tonight.
So
not a great one to be on air.
We got Morgan Adsit, who covers the Ravens, said that Mark Andrews is up and he's walking off the field on his own, but it's slow and he's limping. So that's what we're looking at with Andrews. I'm looking at the broadcast right now. It looks like he's headed. I guess this is probably good news. I think he is. Is he going to the medical tent or are they calling for a cart right now? I'm watching the replay. It looks like he was hit by Logan Wilson. His left knee kind of got twisted up a little bit, but it was such a short review that we got on that. So more to come on Andrews. The Ravens are still searching for a first down inside the 5-yard line. They're trying to get a first and goal for the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll be following the Mark Andrews situation as it goes forward here. Speaking of running backs here, Michael Carter, Theo, he gets released by the Jets this week, and he finds an interesting landing spot in Arizona. I would think that the message to high-stakes players is, look, you still got to roster this guy. You can't start him right now. But what do you think Michael Carter's future is for the remainder of the 2023 season?
It's actually a great landing spot for him because, Amari DiMercato, Keontae Ingram, these are the sort of guys that Carter's had, more long-term success as a pro than these guys. DiMercato had a couple of interesting performances, but he's somewhat of a jag. Whereas Michael Carter's had 90-plus receptions in his career. He does one thing very, very well. And apparently he was one of the more popular Jets. He's a big locker room presence. A lot of the Jets were very upset by them moving on from Michael Carter. So at the end of the day, James Conner is a older running back, and he's also, had missed a lot of time. So this is actually, I think, a really good landing spot for Carter. Do you keep him or do you cut him? It was all team dependent, because I still think it's kind of our looking at the situation objectively, but he's still got to pass those guys on the depth chart. So it's a good opportunity for him. I don't want to go too crazy. But I do think at some point you're going to see him get an opportunity, maybe quicker than we think with this Arizona team.
Couple of quick updates from Thursday Night Football here. Gus Edwards, who else, plunges in from 3 yards out. The Ravens go up 7-0 on the Bengals as they take the opening drive down for a touchdown. 7-0 Baltimore with 10 minutes to go in the first quarter. Mark Andrews, it looks like he did go to the locker room. He was not carted off. He walked to the locker room under his own power. Again, moving slowly. More on that to come. Hopefully, we'll get some. As long as Carissa Thompson isn't making up fake sideline reports.
Yeah, what was that?
Get some accurate information here.
What was that, Balky? That was so weird to see her.
Why would you reveal that? Why would you say that out loud?
You lose all of your credibility,
right?
And I think you don't sound cool. You sound like a phony. You have so many people talking about distrust of media in this country, and then we thought we could trust our sideline reporters, and you're literally saying you're making up stories, and you think you can just coach speak. That was super weird. It was really, really weird. And she's getting attacked. I saw Tracy Wolfson quote tweeted her and just ripped her a new one.
Molly McGrath from ESPN did the same thing.
Yeah. So these a couple of these reporters are really, really, really ripping her. So I'm sure that she's going to have to clarify this, and I'm sure she's going to walk it back a little bit. But even joking about people do not like hearing that.
No, it's not cool. And her BFF, Erin Andrews, I wonder what she thinks about this as well. That's really bizarre too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the opportunity that opened up in the Jets backfield, Theo, with Michael Carter being released. A guy I picked up in numerous leagues last night in waivers was Izzy Abanikanda. I don't know what's going to happen with him. I don't know if he's going to get the opportunity, but the fact that Robert Saleh said that they released Michael Carter because it wouldn't be fair to him to keep him on the team, to give him an opportunity elsewhere, to me suggests that Abanikanda is healing. He is on the right path, and Dalvin Cook is not somebody that you can count on for fantasy. Willing to take a shot with Abanikanda. I don't know what's going to happen, but there's a non-zero chance he could play a big role in the championship weeks, the multi-week championship sprint in high-stakes leagues coming up here.
Yeah, so I think that it's kind of I think what you did was kind of the sharp move, because I understand there's a lot of people kind of talking up Dalvin Cook in this situation, but Dalvin Cook kind of looks like dust. And at the end of the day, Abanikanda is 21 years old. He's an elite athlete. Abanikanda was an absolute, anybody just needs to pop in the tape from the Pittsburgh Pro Day where Abanikanda just went nuts. And we were very high on him at Player Profiler. But again, landing spot matters when it comes to day 3 backs, especially. But there was a time where we thought that he was going to get drafted on day 2. And there was a lot of Abanikanda enthusiasm. He's a Brooklyn kid. He went to high school in Brooklyn. He was like a huge track and field star and football star in Brooklyn. So it's kind of cool for him to be a Jet. And it's been kind of a slow grind, but you've seen this year after year where these guys kind of come out of nowhere and get these opportunities down the stretch. Now, for him to get a big opportunity would be bad things for Breece Hall. So we're not wishing that. But Balky, I do think like at the end of the day, you bought a handcuff for cheap, because I think if Breece Hall went out and missed any time with an injury, like they could try to give Dalvin Cook some extra usage. But what's the volume that Cook could handle at this point in his career? So at the very least, Abanikanda would be in a split backfield with big opportunities. But yeah, if Breece Hall went out, that offense would go south too. So you'd have a bad offense too. But I like kind of where your head's at with Abanikanda. Big time athlete, explosive runner, was very good at Pittsburgh, and he can catch the football.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I point to is if Breece Hall stays healthy, Abanikanda doesn't really factor in, right? But if he were to go down, if he were to get hurt, I can't imagine that Dalvin Cook is going to be the savior, right? It's going to be a situation where you're going to have Abanikanda on fresh legs, who could be the type of player that you stick in as your second running back or maybe as a flex, and we'll see what happens. He's super cheap right now. Find a roster spot. We're looking for league winners at this point. We're trimming off the back end of our roster and trying to find out the big-time difference makers. Abanikanda could be a difference maker. The Ravens have just reported Mark Maskey, who covers the Ravens, said Mark Andrews questionable return with an ankle injury right now. So he has
We'll take it. We'll take it questionable.
That's positive news.
That's great. That's better than a couple minutes ago when I was sick to my stomach.
And the other thing, Theo, like if we get an out, like with 7:50 to go in the first quarter, if we find out he's out for the game, I immediately start thinking like this is a multi-week absence for Mark Andrews, and hopefully he comes back to this game. We'll see what happens there. Speaking of tight ends, you had a very interesting X or tweet or whatever you're supposed to call it right now about the rookie tight ends this year involving Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Luke Musgrave, and Michael Mayer. Can you take us through that and how you envision not only the rookie tight ends this year, but what they're going to be going forward in fantasy football?
Yeah, so Josh Larkey is a friend of mine, and also Wheeler. The guys at 33rd Team do a very good job, and we did some like crossover episodes between Player Profiler and 33rd Team where Matt Kelly, the Podfather, Billy Muzio, and I, and also Matty Kiwoom had 33rd Team guys on our pods at Player Profiler, and we also went on their pods. And for their pods, they did it for dynasty perspective, and we broke down each and every position. So I did the quarterbacks and I did the tight ends, and Matt and Billy did the running back and wide receiver one. And Josh was like, you need to come up with comparisons down the line for all of these players. And it's a really, really fun draft class. It's one we were extremely high on. Like I have a lot of love for Kincaid, a lot of love for Laporta in the process, but basically it broke down where we talked about Mayer. And I think Michael Mayer is, he's shown us he had a 5-catch, 75-yard performance. This past week, he got a touchdown. He had 5 targets. It's been disappointing in terms of production for fantasy managers who, especially dynasty ones, who took him ahead of Laporta. But at the end of the day, I don't think he's going to be a bust. I think he's going to be a Hunter Henry type level talent. So I said Hunter Henry would be a player we could compare him to, where he's going to end up being drafted somewhere in that tight end dead zone, where he's going to end up being like tight end 10 to tight end 18 on any particular year. And maybe he hits, maybe he doesn't. And then I said Luke Musgrave is the hyper athlete. You've seen him firsthand up in the Wisconsin area, bulky, like ridiculous athlete. He was the 15th highest rated athlete all time. Player Profiler, we basically look at these prospects and we do a lot of stuff with their athleticism, and they get an athleticism score. But Musgrave was very, very high up on it. He was the 3rd most athletic tight end in this draft class, and then he was the 15th most athletic of all time. Gets the draft capital needed, lands in a spot where he's on the field the whole time, and he's also, completely relegated like a Tucker Kraft which during the draft process, people thought maybe Tucker Kraft could have been more of a challenge to him. It never happened. Like, it's night and day. So I said Luke Musgrave will have a bigger range of outcomes because I think he could be a David Njoku type player, but with more like consistent usage. Like Njoku, we had a couple of frustrating first few years of his career, some injuries. Musgrave's not going to have that. Like, I think Musgrave is trending towards top 12 tight end as the season moves along. So Musgrave, let's say David Njoku, but if he could have a dream season where some offensive coordinator says, let's target him 90 something times, and then you get like a Darren Waller type outcome. So let's say somewhere between David Njoku and Darren Waller, and then Dalton Kincaid, love him. This is a guy who's going to be an elite target getter. Not a, like, there's been the whole Travis Kelce thing with him. I don't quite see that. But Dalton Kincaid, I think, is like peak Zach Ertz, where he'll get these like several seasons where he has 80 something receptions, which is a huge, huge hit for a tight end. And then I said, Sam Laporta, you have no comparison because he's 6'3", he's 240. So I said, Sam Laporta is like Thor coming into Wakanda in Infinity War, but the dynasty version of that, just coming to save your fantasy teams. And
that's Mark Ruffalo comes in and says, you're all screwed. Yeah, you're all screwed. Basically, if you don't have Sam Laporta, you're all screwed. Yeah, I like that. Bring me Thanos. That's
bring
it. Bring me Thanos. That's
yes. Ready to fight Thanos. That's it.
Oh, that's so good. That is so fantastic. The Bengals have added a 50-yard field goal by Evan McPherson that tightened the Ravens lead from 7-0 to 7-3, 7:32 to go in the first quarter here as we're hanging out on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here on the Better Sports Network. Theo Gremminger, Eric Balkman coming at you. Dom Gazzetti, Laporta is the Theo Gremminger of fantasy.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Dom.
Wouldn't it be like Laporta would be the Theo of the NFL, right? Because you're sort of the Laporta of fantasy.
He's a fantasy Laporta, like whatever. Anytime I can get compared to Laporta,
you're good.
Shout out to the Laporta family. Like, you guys are doing it right. Sam Laporta is going to be the tight end 1 in Dynasty for like 10 years.
Yeah.
What a player. Balky, what's funny is we talked about where he'll be drafted next year in redraft in FFPC because I don't think he's got the ability to be a first round pick in main events. I think he'll settle in right around like end of the second, early third area, just because the only thing we can poke holes in with Laporta is the fact that he plays with Amon-Ra St. Brown and he plays with Jahmyr Gibbs. So you got to figure Gibbs's targets are going to go up in year 2. Yeah. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is like an elite target earner. So like when you compare him to like these years we've seen with like Mark Andrews in Baltimore, or where we had, obviously a bunch of the Kelce years, especially Kelce in like last year when Tyreek Hill wasn't there, is they were like the clear number 1 target earner on their team. That's the only thing we can poke a hole in on Laporta's game. Like, he's unbelievable. He's a great touchdown scorer. He's a big playability. And he meshes very well with Jared Goff and this offensive system. So I love Laporta, but I think he'll be an interesting guy to talk about all offseason long, kind of where he settles in on ADP. I think he could still end up being the number 1 tight end drafted next year, but I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be more of a season where we don't see a tight end in the first round of FFPC leagues, unless Kelce, does something crazy at the end of the season and it looks like he's the clear number 1 target again. But that's for the off season. We're a long way from that.
Right, we are. But I'm curious. I want to explore this a little bit. You think that next year, the odds would say right now that we will not see a tight end drafted in the first round on average in the FFPC next year?
Well, I think that a lot of us are ageist, and if we don't, and we've already seen a little bit of a regression with Travis Kelce. So you don't want to keep, and again, regression with Travis Kelce is not like the guy's still unbelievable. He's still crushing it, but Travis Kelce, every year he gets older, makes him a little less appealing to FFPC drafters. And Bulky, you know how it is. Like, when we get into the summertime, we start poking holes at older players in general. You saw like the kind of the where certain guys will rise up, like the Garrett Wilsons of the world. And it happens every single year in FFPC draft. So I think it could be a year where we don't have a clear-cut tight end in the first round of main events. So if you think about it like this, Balky, like Christian McCaffrey, unless he gets hurt this year, is a lock to go in the first round.
Yep.
Then wide receiver-wise, you've got about 6 or 7 of them that are going to be locks to go in the first round. CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill. So we're already at 7. Then you start looking at the other running backs. The way he's playing right now, Jahmyr Gibbs is on a collision course to be a first-round pick for your fantasy team next year in the main event. Then you also have guys like, if Breece Hall stays healthy for the rest of the year with his receiving ability, he could be heading in that first round. Then you've also got Devon Achane with the very small sample size, but he's heading in there. And then Bijan Robinson, which 6 months ago, I would have told you he's going to be the number 1 pick in 2024 drafts. Like I thought, but at the end of the day, people are going to it's going to be very difficult for Bijan Robinson to not be a first round pick in FFPC main events next year. Like he's going to have to, the season's going to have to go really poorly to end the year, but we just saw him have a 20 carry, 90 yard touchdown game. There's a chance they could move on from Arthur Smith, and there's a chance you have a much better quarterback for the Falcons next year. So I think Bijan falls in that first round. So then you start doing the math. If Stephon Diggs is still a Buffalo Bill and is averaging 17.5, 18 points per game, or you have Travis Kelce, but then you look at Kelce and you have like Laporta behind him, Hawkinson behind him, guys that are kind of threatening his hierarchy, you might not have a tight end in the first round of FFPC main events. Yeah. And maybe I'm totally misreading that.
Well, but you could be right. I mean, everything you said, there's a non-zero chance of that happening. Like I could see everything. Okay, everything you just said, nothing seems weird or out of place as it stands right now. So you could be right. And I think the whole thing, the whole crux of it is, are FFPC players ageist? And if they are, then I think you're right. If they're not, then yeah, I think we could see Kelce sneak in, something like that. Maybe Mark Andrews, depending upon what happens. Speaking of Andrews, Ravens, no updates on Andrews yet. 5:45 to go in the first quarter. The Ravens have just punted the ball back to the Bengals. They have it 1st and 10 from their own 37 again, just under 6 minutes to go in the first quarter. I want you to take this any way you want, dynasty, redraft, whatever. Where do you stand on Jackson Smith and Jigba, Theo? A guy that started off slow this year because of the injury. He's dealing with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, at least for this year, maybe years going forward as well. But it's not like he hasn't been the standout receiver here. We've seen more than 1 week where he led the team in catches and yards. Where do you stand on JSN right now, man?
I'm still a JSN guy. I think we also have to factor in the fact that JSN didn't play last year at Ohio State. He was hurt. He missed the season at Ohio State. He still goes off the board as the number 1 wide receiver selected. The landing spot is not ideal based on the guys around him. And then he gets the broken wrist and he plays through it. And he had to have a lot of practice with a cast on his wrist. And he's finally started to see a little bit better results fantasy wise, but I'm still on Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think maybe I need to kind of cool the jets a little bit from where I had him, but like where we have him in player profiler for Dynasty, I think he's still like a top 16 to 18 Dynasty wide receiver. And I think that it's hard to kind of lower him lower than that. He's also a very young player. And I think next year, I think he's going to take a big step forward. I think next year he's going to be, have a much bigger opportunity. Lockett's getting older. But yeah, I'm holding hope. I'm still holding out on JSN. I think it's more of a situation and usage issue rather than a talent issue.
For the remainder of this season and for Dynasty, you'd rather have Smith and Jigba over Christian Watson, correct? Dom Gazzetti.
A million percent JSN over Christian Watson. Christian Watson has been a huge disappointment to a lot of us. Balky, correct me if I'm wrong, but is Christian Watson, how many games over 30 yards receiving has he had?
I think one.
One.
Here's the thing is with Watson, Jordan Love's quarterback rating is among the lowest in the league, and definitely the lowest on the Packers when targeting Watson. His quarterback rating when targeting Jaden Reed is out of this world. It's been fantastic. I don't think there's one, and I'm not ready to write off Watson from Dynasty, although like the temptation's there, Theo. The temptation
He's also
is there.
bulky. Like Watson, the other thing, we think about guys being, second year players.
Yeah.
But Watson was old when he came into the league for wide receivers. He already had a knock on him because he's a 4-year guy. And now he's 24 and a half. So when you draft Christian Watson next year, he is a 25-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's this draft class, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we've had a lot of success with the Olaves, the Garrett Wilsons, this year with the Zay Flowers, the Jordan Addisons. But this coming draft class in 2024 is insane. They're all big too. These are all your classic alpha size wide receivers. So a guy like Christian Watson, who's a borderline, very impactful dynasty asset, with in terms of trade equity, he becomes worth less next year. Because these guys Keon Coleman and Roma Dunze.
Yeah.
And that's not even talking, about Marvin Harrison Jr., who's a Jamar Chase level player that Marvin Harrison, shout out to Darren Armani. You can check this out on Fantasy Mojo. But when we start getting our early startup ADP, Marvin Harrison Jr., before he's drafted by a team, is going to be a top 5. He's going to be a top 5 pick in FFPC dynasty drafts. Top 5.
All right. So Dom Guzzetti chiming in. It's been 3 games over 30 yards this year, which is right. I just looked that up. However, it's been 1 game out over 40 yards. He had
okay,
91.
so that's the one, because Billy was talking about that stat, and it just blew my mind because you don't think about it.
He's had over 20 in every game, so I guess that he's played. Remember, he missed some time. I'm not willing to pin this all on Christian Watson yet. In the same way, I'm not willing to pin the Packers' offensive struggles solely on Jordan Love right now. I think that based on what we saw with Watson last year, it's especially the second half of the season, really, really difficult for me to believe that he can't do it. I think that he has it in him. I think he's got to make adjustments to what defenses are throwing at him. I also think that Jordan Love should stop forcing the ball into Watson, because it's quite frankly making the Packers offense look bad when he does that. I haven't seen anything. I shouldn't say anything, Theo. I've seen very little from Christian Watson from what we saw last year. These mid-range routes, these jet sweeps, these end arounds to get him involved. It's been all 9 routes, a ton of 9 routes, and not a lot of creativity beyond that. So I think some of this goes to LaFleur yet. But for me, you're right. The red flags are out there. I do have concerns with him. Not ready to give it up yet, but certainly it's not looking great. This is coming from Kaylee Harton, the sideline reporter for Amazon Prime Video. Mark Andrews is in the X-ray room right now. He's on crutches. He cannot put weight on the ankle, and he's officially been ruled out for the game tonight. Don't know what that means. Don't know what it means going forward, but certainly not good news for Mark Andrews, at least in Week 11. Hopefully, it turns out better for you, Mark Andrews owners like Theo, going forward in Week 12 and beyond. I don't know what to think at this point. I don't know what to think.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, any way you cut it, it's terrible. If you have, and it's terrible for the Ravens too, because Isaiah Likely is just not Mark Andrews, and we had. It seemed like it was kind of like the for like contingent value play. Likely had the one opportunity in Week 1 and was non-existent. He had 1 catch. I don't know if Monken values him like maybe we did last year. So I don't know. The whole thing is weird. I don't know if there's a big winner in this situation. I think it kind of makes the offense just a little bit easier to defend. And Balky, it's also the worst timing because you not only have him in your lineup tonight and you take whatever, he had 1 reception. So maybe in an FFPC league, you're sitting on 4 points. Next week, they play the Chargers. And that was going to be the game where all your Ravens you could start. It's terrible. It's just terrible.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good for anyone. Not at all. I want to talk about, and we haven't touched really on this tonight, and maybe you don't have any good answers for the Buffalo Bills right now because we don't know what the offense is going to Ken Dorsey was the guy who got fired. The former, I always think about him as the Miami quarterback. I don't think of him as a coordinator in the NFL. But he gets fired. Joe Brady takes over for the Bills. I guess the best way to phrase this question is, what do you sort of expect from the Bills offense going forward with Joe Brady? Or are your expectations basically at zero because anything could happen right now, Theo?
It's a really, really good question. And I think that there's a lot of mystery as to what he does. It's also a really difficult game for him to make his debut. It's not a soft defense by any means. That, like you said, it's a low total game. The Jets, really had success against Buffalo. Their defense, had really, really big moments in that opener. And now it's sort of a must-win game for Buffalo coming off that loss as well. So it's funny because Joe Brady, what an interesting kind of career for him, because at one point, like 5 years ago, he was looked at as the smartest guy in the country. Like this was the Ben Johnson of the era. He could have had any college job he wanted, offensive coordinator at LSU under at Orgeron, and then he takes this weird move to go take the offensive coordinator job in Carolina, and then he was kind of unfairly pushed out the door, I thought. And now he's back full circle, and he's the offensive coordinator for Josh Allen. So it's a really cool subplot. I'd like to think it's a little bit more wide open offense. I'd like to think that they utilize James Cook a little bit more. I think James Cook is a very good player. I think he needs to get the ball out in space. I thought that was the whole idea of James Cook this year was, taking a little bit of the pressure off of Josh Allen and offering a dynamic back. I really hope that this doesn't affect Dalton Kincaid. That would be like my fear, that Dalton Kincaid is somehow has a little less usage with the regime change, but I don't see how you could put Kincaid away. More likely than not, it's about the same, and Ken Dorsey was just their scapegoat. That's usually how these things go, right, Balky?
Right.
Where these guys just get fired just so they say we got rid of somebody, and it wasn't McDermott. They get rid of his Dorsey, and they give the next man in an opportunity. I do think they need to be tighter with the football if they're going to be a playoff team and they're going to make a run here and get themselves back in the AFC playoffs. They can't be as turnover prone. Josh Allen turning the ball over a lot. And also we've seen James Cook with the fumbles recently. So it's definitely a tilting one. It's a lot more exciting than talking about the play calling change in Carolina, though.
Right. All right. So Rocco DeSangro, the hits coming for the Baltimore Ravens tonight, just reporting, and I just saw the injury. Lamar Jackson was down on the field, and he's slow to get up. Now, this looks better than the Mark Andrews thing for what it's worth. It looked like, and by the way, it was Logan Wilson on the tackle, Lamar Jackson. It looked like an ankle injury for Jackson. Now, he did get up. He walked over and he sat down on the bench under his own power, continued to talk to trainers. He has now left the bench. He's walked into the medical tent, not the locker room, and he's being looked at there. The Bengals are about to receive the Ravens punt. That's what we're looking at from Lamar Jackson. This is a guy who I believe this is the same ankle he hurt a couple of years ago and missed that time at the end of the season. We'll be waiting to see what happens with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson into the medical tent, an ankle potentially on that tackle. That's the latest report we're getting from Morgan Adsit, who covers the Baltimore Ravens at this point. Bengals back on the field. They have the ball with 2:34 to go in the first quarter, down 7-3 at the 42-yard line. Hey, let me tell you a little bit about the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. You can get the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription right now, unlocking all content for all sports, including the annual draft guides, one-on-one expert access in the Discord. You can sync your league to analyze matchups and trends in your specific leagues. The lineup generator is integrated with Fanjections as well, daily rankings, weekly rankings, the value vault, position coaches, waiver wire, ownership percentages, projections, stats, and tools. You can build better lineups guaranteed. Get access to everything Fantasy Alarm offers all year. Just use promo code LOCK at fantasyalarm.com/lock. That's promo code LOCK, LOCK. I guess, looking at, I'm trying to find the bright side right now, Theo, with the injuries.
There's none.
To Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson, I can't. I'm looking for the silver lining, man, and I can't see it right now. The only silver lining we would see is Lamar Jackson coming out from the medical tent back onto the field for the next possession. Dom Gazzetti wants to know where I am right now. He's always wondered where I am with the pods. It is an office area because this is my office that I'm working at. I have basically 3 jobs, technically 4 jobs if you want to view BSN as a job. So this is my work office is where I do it from. Lamar Jackson, it looks like is no, I beg your pardon. We still don't have an update on him. The Amazon just showed very briefly Tyler Huntley throwing a couple of passes, still with the heavy overcoat on. Didn't have that on. Didn't have his helmet on. We'll see what happens going forward there with the Ravens. Let's get into a couple. We only have a few minutes left in the show, and we'll try to update you on the Lamar Jackson situation here. But Theo, if you could only play one of these guys, non-Superflex league, you got to play one quarterback. Is it Justin Fields this week against the Lions, or are you playing Brock Purdy against the Buccaneers?
I think that that's kind of a tough one. I want to say Justin Fields. Like, I think, it's kind of a risk tolerance thing though for me. Like, I think that Justin Fields definitely has the higher ceiling. Brock Purdy has the built-in pretty safe floor against Tampa. So for me, I'm gonna say it's team specific. If I felt like I was in need of catching up on points, or if I was in a where I look at my matchup and say this is a really tough matchup for me, then I would definitely go Justin Fields. But if I was like an overwhelming favorite and I just needed to win this week, I have no problem going Purdy. I think they're both like locked in, like kind of top 15 quarterback plays. Fields would definitely be ranked higher. I know Billy Muzio, Billy is one of the better rankers in the country at Player Profiler, and Billy does not trust Justin Fields this week. I have way more trust level than Billy does right now.
Okay, and that's
Purdy's
fair.
fine. Purdy's fine though, guys. Like, Purdy's balling. Like, he's balling. Last week he played great, and every time you kind of doubt Brock, it's literally no doubt for me with Brock Purdy. Again, I started him over Joe Burrow this week, and I have him rocking in a few spots, but I think it's going to be a Justin Fields game. It's more of a little hunch. And you also, people have kind of struggled to run the ball against Detroit. So I think it could be Justin Fields having to pass a little more and be like an opportunistic scrambler. And those kind of things kind of usually equal a solid fantasy outing.
I think the last thing I want to end up with tonight is a compelling one. If you can only play one of these guys at your flex this week, full PPR, Theo, are you playing Calvin Ridley at home against the Tennessee Titans, or are you playing Rachaad White against that vaunted 49ers defense?
Oh, it's Rachaad White all day. Rachaad White's an RB1 right now. Rachaad White's gotten back-to-back weeks of 20 carries, and I realize that it's the San Francisco 49ers defense is very, very good, but Rachaad White also is a threat out of the backfield as a pass catcher. He caught a receiving touchdown last week. And at the end of the day, I don't want to trust Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley's he's like fancy Gabe Davis right now. He's like fancy Gabe Davis. It's like he could have a spike week, or he could literally kill your week. Rachaad White, Billy has him as a top 6 running back this week, and Billy's the biggest 49ers fan in the world. But at the end of the day, start Rachaad White. RB1 right now. How can you bench him?
Good news coming. Lamar Jackson has his helmet on. Looks like he's ready to come back onto the field. Second quarter is about to get underway. We'll see you in the Better Cast. Theo Gremminger, we will see you literally on every fantasy football podcast. We'll continue to follow you at the OG Fantasy on the X Machine. Keep up the great work at Player Profiler, dude. We appreciate
Thanks, Balky. Appreciate you, man.
Theo Gremminger, tonight's guest. Next week, we will have John Daniel from the GOAT District on Tuesday. Tuesday show at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for 2 full hours. Happy Thanksgiving. That will be our gift to you. Thanks for watching, everybody. The best of the Better Sports Network is up next.